Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a bit of a journey into ancient wisdom, but, well, with a really modern twist. We're going to tackle something you might have seen in the Kybalion, the 1908 book, often linked back to ancient Egyptian Hermetic stuff, the 7 Hermetic Principles. And when you first hear things like, all is mind, or as above, so below, that can sound pretty, well, deeply mystical, right?
Abstract.
Almost like, spiritual sayings. But what if these ideas, these seemingly esoteric nuggets, actually hold some really practical insights about the universe? What if, when you look at them again, but through a sharp scientific lens, they actually offer a surprisingly solid framework for understanding reality? That's basically our mission today. We're going to use something called motion theory MT as our kind of decoder ring. Think of it like stripping away the mystical vibe and asking, okay, what if these principles are actually describing the fundamental testable behavior of structured motion? We'll take each one, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and justainer it, and translate them into precise, structured motion terms. The goal here is to keep what really holds up to experimental testing and, gently set aside what doesn't. We promise you a real shortcut here. You should walk away with a surprisingly practical checklist for how structured motion works across different scales. And we think you'll find some genuinely surprising facts that turn these old sayings into actual verifiable science. It's almost like finding a hidden universal grammar for the cosmos. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we dive into the principles themselves, we need a common language, a shared vocabulary from motion theory. Its ground rule is simple but, well, profound. Everything is structured motion. Not just philosophy, it's the lens for today. But what does that really mean for basics like space or time?
That's a great question. And it's fascinating how motion theory redefines things we usually just take for granted, like space. In MT, we're not talking about an empty box. Space is more like unresolved background change. It's the motion itself before it forms into, structures we can see.
Unresolved background change. Okay, that sounds a bit abstract still. Can you make it more tangible?
Sure. Imagine being in a really dense fog. You can't see distinct objects, right? Just this continuous sort of swirling movement everywhere. That undifferentiated movement, that sea of shifting activity without clear forms. That's kind of like unresolved background change. That's space. And from there, time becomes how we measure loops of motion updating relative to each other. It's not some universal clock ticking away, it's relational, comparing rhythms, energy, that's basically the tension in the motion, the potential, and mass, that's simply motion resistance, how much something fights changes to its movement.
So mass isn't just stuff, it's about how it resists being pushed. Okay, that's a subtle shift.
Yeah.
Powerful, though. And gravity. The mysterious pull.
Exactly. And gravity, instead of being this weird force, is just convergence toward higher synchronization density. Think of it like when lots of little motions start to line up, synchronize, they naturally tend to cluster together, become denser. That clustering, that movement towards areas of more synchronization, that's what we feel as gravity. And finally, fields, electromagnetic, gravitational, they're really just motion gradients, how the intensity or direction of motion changes across an area. And tying it all together, structure hangs around when that synchronization density stays high, and when leak or drag stays low. It gives us a really concrete way to talk about why anything exists.
Right. High sync, low leak. Okay, with that foundation, that MT vocabulary where everything's motion, let's tackle the 7 principles one by one. Starting with mentalism. The Hermetic line is, all is mind, which, yeah, sounds very abstract, poetic almost.
It does, but the motion theory translation isn't saying matter is just thought. It's more that your experience of reality is governed by how your brain's internal motion loops synchronize to the environment. Perception, in this view, becomes a kind of control problem, a really complex one. Your brain's internal rhythms, think alpha, gamma, theta waves, they're constantly trying to lock on to external rhythms from light, sound, touch, trying to find the right frequency, literally.
Ah, okay. So the surprise here is that feeling stuck or struggling with a new idea, it might not be just a mental block. It could be a literal challenge in rephasing those internal brain rhythms to match new information. Your perception is always trying to tune in, and sometimes it just needs the right frequency lock.
Precisely. No ghost in the machine, just a very sophisticated synchronization policy. And what holds up experimentally here are things like predictive processing the brain, predicting what's next phase locking of brain waves, and attention acting as a sort of gain control, amplifying certain inputs. A brain that can't rephase flexibly often feels, stuck. It struggles to adapt. You could test this too. Present identical sounds or flashes, but tweak the microtiming so they either align or misalign with someone's ongoing brainwaves. MT predicts accuracy, comprehension, it spikes with alignment. and dips when misaligned. You're literally measuring how wide the brain tunes in.
That's fascinating. Okay, from the mind synchronizing dance, let's shift to the fabric of existence itself with vibration. The Hermetic text says nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This one feels maybe a bit more intuitive now, right, with quantum physics and all that. But how does MT deepen it?
It absolutely does. And MT gives it real scientific teeth. Our translation is that structures are their spectra. A thing isn't solid and static. It's fundamentally a unique bundle of frequencies it can support while resisting motion leak. Change that spectral bundle, the specific frequencies, how they interact, and you fundamentally change the thing. Even stillness is just motion below our detection threshold. It's like a musical chord change, one note. You change the whole feeling.
So the surprising fact is, the identity of anything, a rock, a thought, isn't its static form, but its dynamic frequency signature. Change the tune, change the dancer. Is that it?
That's a great way to put it, exactly. And what survives scrutiny here are things like Brownian motion, random particle jiggles, zero-point energy, phonons in crystals, spin precession. They're all specific, measurable examples of everything vibrates. What we need to drop, though, are claims that vibration alone explains, say, morality or complex cause and effect. That's stretching it too far. For a test, think about a cavity Q sweep, measuring how well a resonant cavity, like in a laser, stores energy. MT could predict the resonance width based on a model of its internal motion and energy leak. You're measuring the fidelity of its vibration.
Okay, so everything's vibrating, structures are their spectra. What happens when these different vibrations meet? That leads us to polarity. The principle says everything is dual. Opposites are identical in nature, differing only in degree. Sounds very philosophical, yin and yang.
Yeah, and what's cool is how this translates mechanistically into phase opposition and complementary modes. Many opposites aren't truly separate things. They're often just phase-shifted states or parameter-flipped versions of the same basic motion family, like hot and cold, not separate things, just different points on a kinetic energy spectrum, different degrees of motion, or attraction-repulsion, just different signs on a synchronization gradient. Even order disorder can be seen as different levels of sync density. High sync is order, low sync is chaos. So polarity is really about how these modes interfere, constructively reinforcing, or destructively canceling out, and how systems flip between states.
So the surprise is, opposites are often just different steps in the same dance, not separate dances entirely. Seemingly contradictory forces are actually, deeply connected.
Precisely. What holds up is the continuity between modes and the idea of symmetry breaking systems shifting states. We just need to avoid stretching polarity to fit everything symbolically. It's about mechanism, a test. You could take two nonlinear oscillators, like connected metronomes, and play with their tuning and coupling strength. MT would predict exactly where they flip from swinging together, in phase, let's call it love, to swinging opposite, anti-phase, maybe strife. You measure their phase relationship to verify.
Following polarity, we get rhythm. Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides. This makes you think of natural cycles, right? Seasons, tides.
Exactly. And connecting this to the bigger picture, rhythm in MT is about entrainment, drift, and recurrence. Systems under constraints naturally show cycles. Beats between coupled parts, recovery wiggles after a shock, drifting around stable points. And here's the surprising insight. Rhythm dictates when a structure is most open to change, when it's most moldable. Because susceptibility is phase-dependent. Timing is crucial if you want to influence something.
Right. So say you're trying to learn something new or break a habit. Understanding your own internal rhythm or the rhythm of the situation could tell you the best time to make a move. It's not just effort, but effort at the right phase.
That's it exactly. What survives scientifically is entrainment. How different rhythms lock together. Think pendulum clocks syncing up on a wall, our sleep cycles locking to daylight, laser modes coordinating. What we drop is any kind of strict determinism, like fate. Rhythms shape likelihoods, they don't seal your destiny. For a test, phase-specific interventions are key. In biology, maybe pulse a cell pathway with a chemical at different points in its natural cycle. MT predicts the biggest effect, maybe cell division speeds up most will happen at specific high susceptibility phases. You measure and check.
As above, so below. Correspondence. Probably the most famous one, often used mystically, connecting small and large scales. But people often jump to analogies that are too literal, right? Like humans are just souls in a cosmic body. How do we tell real shared patterns from just wishful thinking?
That's a really crucial point. Motion theory sees this as scale-linked dynamics. Same grammar, different parameters. What's genuinely fascinating is that similar synchronization grammars do pop up across incredible scales. You see the same basic patterns, oscillators coupling up, gradients driving flow, feedback loops creating stability, even when the materials and speeds are totally different. It's not a one-to-one map. It's a shared rulebook for how motion behaves.
So the surprising bit is the universe isn't just patterned. It has the same kinds of patterns repeating everywhere, like different dialects of one cosmic language. From tiny to huge, the rules for change and stability are often strangely similar.
Exactly. Think galaxy bars, those big structures and spirals,
Wow.
or heart arrhythmias, or traffic jams, or laser modes. They all show similar dynamics, like phase competition, mode selection. What survives is the recurrence of things like bifurcations, limit cycles, resonance, hysteresis across these different scales. We drop the numerology, the one-to-one symbols. It's about shared grammar, not symbols. A powerful test. Build a cross-domain synchronization atlas. Use shared dimensionless numbers like a coupling strength kappa or a leak rate lambda that describe the system regardless of what it's made of. Then predict regimes stable, oscillating, chaotic in things like fluids, lasers, crowds, cell signals, just based on their kappa and lambda values. If the same rules work across domains, that's strong evidence for a shared grammar.
Wow. Okay. The same rules everywhere. That's huge. Moving to cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Feels foundational, right? Basic science. How does MT refine this?
It does, yeah. MT refines it by focusing on gradients, constraints, and interventions. Our translation is, motion flows down these synchronization pressure gradients. But the outcome really depends on the system's current state, its phase. Causation isn't just simple billiard balls hitting each other. It's more like shorthand for how deliberate interventions reshape those gradients and the starting conditions. We shift from that linear A hits B idea to a more complex view, looking at how specific actions, interventions change the dynamics within the system's loops.
Okay, so the surprise takeaway. Cause and effect isn't a straight line. It's a dynamic dance. The starting point, the system's internal rhythm, they hugely influence what happens when you intervene. It's about nudging things the right way at the right time.
Exactly. What survives is interventional clarity, being able to clearly define and predict what an intervention will do. What we drop is telling stories after the fact, ignoring the system's hidden state. Just because B happened after A doesn't make A the cause. For a test, you'd pre-register loop models, math models specifying the phase, coupling, leak. Then predict intervention outcomes, maybe in electronic oscillators, or how fish sync to light cycles, or even pedestrian flow. If your model accurately predicts how these different systems react to changes, you're getting at a real mechanistic understanding of cause and effect.
Right. Prediction, not just explanation.
Yep.
Okay, finally, gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. This one often gets misinterpreted, loaded with biology or social stuff. We need to be super clear. We're not going there.
Absolutely right. Crucial point. Read this not as biology, but as generative complementarity. The MT translation is about the complementary roles needed for something to self-generate and keep going. Think write-or-read, encode code, driver store, excitation inhibition. Real persistent instructions need these opposing operators, these complementary forces, to co-stabilize a loop. One force alone often leads to collapse.
So the surprise is that stability, self-sustaining systems,
Yeah.
they aren't about one dominant force. They need this dynamic balance. Two complementary, often opposing forces interacting constantly. The give and take, push and pull creates lasting patterns.
Precisely. What survives is complementarity as a basic design rule for stable, self-organizing systems. Like oscillation, it needs both push and pull to keep going. What we absolutely must drop is any biological essentialism or social rules derived from this. That's not what it's about in this context. To test it, build minimal generative loops. Chemical oscillators maybe, or simple neural nets. Then ablate one part, remove it. Take out the inhibition in a neural net, for example. MT predicts collapse, either runaway activity or total silence. Put the complement back, the rhythm returns. You'd measure the stable operating range with and without that part to verify. And what's really striking here is how motion theory sharpens this old Hermetic framework. It takes these, potentially vague aphorisms and makes them testable, verifiable. Where Hermeticism is poetic, MT offers precision. Aphorisms become models with parameters you can measure: sync density, coupling, leak, phase. Symbolism gives way to mechanism. We replace mystical links with things like conserved quantities, symmetry arguments, all derived from the action of motion. And where Hermeticism might hint at certainty, MT brings in probability. Rhythms influence outcomes. They don't preordain them. Which raises a big question. For us and for you listening, how many other ancient ideas, maybe dismissed as just mysticism, are waiting for this kind of rigorous mechanistic translation?
That is a powerful thought. So we've got through each principle. But if we zoom out, Do these 7 ideas, seen through MT, actually click together? Do they form a coherent picture, not just a list?
Oh, absolutely. They weave together beautifully. Think about it connecting to the bigger picture. It starts with vibration. That defines what a system can be. Its identity, its frequency signature. Then rhythm organizes those frequencies in time, gives them structure, cycles. Polarity sets the interference rules, the push and pull, constructive, destructive dynamics. Correspondence explains why similar patterns, similar motion grammars show up at different scales, micro to macro. Cause and effect tells us how to influence the system, how interventions on gradients can shift things. Gender insists on those complementary pairs needed for stability, for self-generation. And finally, mentalism reminds us our access to all this, our perception, is through a synchronizing brain. An active participant that can amplify or mute patterns based on how it locks on, it really becomes a unified view of reality, all seen through the lens of motion.
And the truly exciting part, what makes this more than just theory, is that it's testable. Rigorously. It's a falsifiable package for the lab. What exactly do we mean by falsifiable here?
Falsifiable means we can design experiments where the results could actually prove us wrong. We're not just seeking confirmation. We define conditions where our predictions must fail if MT isn't right. So, for mentalism.test neural phase alignment, see if behavior changes as predicted. Correspondence.use that cross-domain atlas, predict behavior in different systems. Vibration.predict resonance efficiency based on leak models. Polarity.pinpoint where systems flip phase states. Rhythm.show phase-specific interventions have measurably bigger effects at the right time. Cause and effect. Pre-register loop models, see if they predict intervention outcomes better than other methods. And gender, remove a complement. Observe the predicted collapse or runaway. The scientific rigor is key. Pre-register studies, share data openly, accept null results. If these principles survive this process as quantified behaviors of structured motion, they graduate. From aphorisms to real scientific tools.
So what does this all mean for you? It means the 7 Hermetic Principles, read charitably, mechanistically. They really look like an early, incredibly insightful folk physics. For a universe made of motion. Motion theory lets us keep their living core. Everything moves. Patterns repeat. Opposites are phase relations. Cycles matter. Interventions work. Complementary roles are needed. The mind is a synchronization engine. All profound ideas. And it grounds them in experiments. Experiments that can actually win or lose in the lab. No incense needed. Just structured motion. Measured carefully. Predictions made in advance, kept public. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient wisdom might be out there, waiting for a modern scientific translation? We encourage you to think about how understanding these universal grammars of motion might change how you see everything, from your own brain to the cosmos itself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.